They don't make a sound. That's what kills you first. The Ghost Fleet, they aren't just ships. They're voids in the fabric of space, devouring everything in their path without a single distress signal. My home, Nova Terra, was the last one left. And I was the only thing standing between them and the dust. The Icarus was never a beautiful ship. Even before the Ghost Fleet came, she was old. Conduit insulation held together with thermal tape. A life support panel that beeped every 40 minutes for a reason nobody had ever successfully diagnosed. I had been her chief technician for 9 years. Now, she was dead. Power lines severed, engines cold. The reactor shut down by my own hands 3 weeks ago, when I realized that running it was the same as sending up a flare. Everything still alive on this ship was alive because of me. The hydroponics bay had heat. Barely. Because I had rerouted the last functional battery line through the water circulation pump and let the biology do the rest. Air recycler at 11% capacity. Just enough. I had calculated just enough 17 times in 3 weeks. I was very tired of calculating just enough. My father had a rule. He said it once and never repeated it. He said, "A ship is alive as long as someone on her believes she is." Nova Terra was still down there. The last reports I had received before communications went dark described failing atmospheric processors, population shelters running on the same just enough I was running on up here. I was in a maintenance crawl space, wedged between a coolant pipe and a hull strut. My father would have found this funny. I was trying to.
I didn't need the sensors to tell me. I felt it in the hull, in the way the silence changed quality and became something with weight. They were here.
12 obsidian cruisers, resolving out of dark space like blades from a sheath. No transition, no gradual appearance on sensors. One moment, empty space. The next, 12 ships, each one larger than anything I had seen in 9 years of working with ships that felt large. They moved like they owned every cubic meter of space they occupied. They moved like we weren't there. Their field effect swept over the Icarus, the same mechanism that had severed my power lines 3 weeks ago. The batteries dipped. Came back. I held my breath until they did. They were scanning, looking for what they always looked for: fusion output, targeting system emissions, anything pulsing with the signature of technology in operation. The Icarus? The Icarus had none of that. The Icarus had me. 3 batteries, a hydroponics bay producing heat at roughly the output of 4 adults in a small room, and 22 days of fermented organic waste stored in every container I could find. They swept their arrays across us and registered nothing. Not nothing as in absence. Nothing as in irrelevant. I watched one cruiser pass within 400 meters of my hull without adjusting course. I was debris to them, a dead husk. The thing you fly past, because what you are looking for is not there. I watched them. And then I looked at the hydroponics bay readings. And I started thinking, what are they looking for? Technology, precision, signals with mathematical regularity, anything designed. What is the one thing on this ship that is the exact opposite of that? The hydroponics waste hadn't been my finest engineering achievement. In normal operation, the Icarus processed organic waste through a standard biodigestion cycle. Clean, contained, vented at regulated intervals. 3 weeks ago, biodigestion was the first system I shut down. What I had instead was 22 days of accumulated organic material, vegetable matter, fermentation byproduct, and a volatile gas mixture that had been building pressure in the tanks in a way I had been managing with manual releases every 6 hours. It was, technically, a mess. It was also the most complex organic chemical signature on this ship. Possibly in this sector. Their sensors were calibrated for technology, for designed systems, for mathematical regularity. They had no algorithm for 22 days of decomposing hydroponics waste aboard a dead ship. Nobody had ever been desperate enough to make that a variable. I thought about what happens when you vent a complex organic vapor cloud into vacuum. What happens when precision navigation software encounters an atmospheric signature it has never been trained to classify? I thought about my father's rule. I had garbage. I had a lot of garbage. I opened the manual vent controls.
I want to be honest about what I was thinking. I was not thinking about saving Novaterra. I was thinking about the vent pathway calculations I was running in my head, because the navigation computer was offline, and I was doing this on memory, and 9 years of knowing this ship's exhaust system the way I knew the back of my own hand. I was thinking about whether the volatility of the gas mixture would cause ignition before it dispersed. If it ignited too early, I would have announced my presence to 12 cruisers in the most emphatic way possible. I thought about that for approximately 4 seconds. I didn't have longer. I connected the overflow lines to every secondary vent port I could reach. Checked the passive optical one last time. The nearest cruiser, 310 meters off starboard. Moving slow. Scanning. About to pass. I thought about my father. About a ship being alive as long as someone believes she is. I believed. I opened everything. The cloud was not elegant. I want to be clear about that. There was nothing precise about what came out of those vents. 22 days of fermented vegetable matter and volatile organic compounds releasing at once into vacuum, immediately expanding and interacting with the Ghost Fleet's own field effect in ways I had predicted in the broadest sense and not predicted at all in the specifics. It bloomed. That is the only word for it. It bloomed outward from the hole in an expanding, irregular mass. And to their precision navigation software, it looked like nothing in their taxonomy. Not a ship, not debris, not any of the 4,012 phenomena their systems had been calibrated to identify.
To their sensors, it looked like atmosphere. Specifically, the leading edge of an uncharted planetary body that had not been there 30 seconds ago. The nearest cruiser's collision avoidance engaged before its command system could override. Automated systems, doing exactly what they were designed to do. They braked. They rerouted. And the ship behind them, which had not yet resolved the sensor data, was still moving at fleet formation speed. I watched on the passive optical with my hands flat against the cold hull. 4 of the 12 most feared ships in the known galaxy had become a navigational hazard to each other because I threw my garbage at them. They retreated. Methodical, even in crisis. I'll give them that. They pulled back in order. They did not fire. They calculated whether there was a threat to engage. They decided there was not. I was still a dead ship with empty tanks. They just didn't know what I was. And the Ghost Fleet, I understood then,
had never encountered something it couldn't classify. That was the gap. Not firepower, not strategy. A gap in their taxonomy. They had categories for ships, for debris, for planets. They had no category for a woman who had been fermenting waste fuel for 3 weeks because she needed to keep the heat on.
Novaterra's emergency array, backup power. Someone down there had found a way. I kept my response short. I said, Icarus here, still holding. 4 minutes of relay silence. Then a voice, clipped, exhausted, doing the same calculations I had been doing for 22 days. They said, we see debris signatures. Ghost fleet? I said, friendly debris. Don't worry about it. A pause. They said, what happened? I looked at my empty tanks. At the hydroponics bay, still producing heat now the overflow pressure was gone. At the 3 batteries that had kept the air cycling for 22 days. At the passive optical, empty space. The normal kind of empty. The Ghost Fleet was precision. Every sensor calibrated. Every response mapped to a known variable. Humans were not precision. Humans were thermal tape on a conduit that should have been replaced years ago. Humans were 3 weeks of fermentation math done in a crawl space on muscle memory and stubbornness. Humans were a dead ship, kept alive on just enough, because the alternative had never once been acceptable. We break, we patch, we keep going. And what we had left over? The garbage, the mess, the things too chaotic and organic and desperate to be categorized, that was always stranger than whatever came to find us. I said, tell the shelters to start rationing for recovery. I'll need resupply before I can run salvage. A long pause. Then, are you okay up there? I looked at the hydroponics bay, the plant matter still growing in its racks. Small, green, alive after 22 days of everything. Because alive things, given just enough, find a way to stay alive. I said, yeah. I said, the Icarus is holding. And she was. She always had been. 3 days after the retreat, the Ghost Fleet's command archive received a mandatory incident report. It was filed by Fleet Commander Veth Oran. Designation, Third Silence. 41 successful planetary clearances. 0 prior incidents. The report read as follows. Incident classification. Navigation failure. Cascading. Ships affected. 4 of 12. Cause. Anomalous atmospheric signature. Origin unconfirmed. Sensor data appended. The anomaly registered as planetary atmosphere. Class 7 density. Complex organic compound structure. Non-repeating molecular pattern. Navigation avoidance protocols engaged automatically. Correction attempt failed. Formation integrity lost. Post-incident analysis found no planet. The anomaly has been traced to a single stationary vessel. No power signature. No weapon system. No active technology of any classification. The vessel appeared dead. It was not dead. Request filed to High Command. Expand sensor taxonomy. Current classification system accounts for 4,012 distinct phenomena. The incident object fits none of them. Proposed new classification. Human remnant vessel. Characteristics. No power, no weapons, no detectable threat signature. Observed behavior. Hostile. Mechanism of hostility. Unknown. Possibly organic. Possibly intentional. Possibly both. Recommendation.
Do not approach human vessels that appear non-functional. Clarification. Do not approach human vessels that appear non-functional even when sensor confirmation indicates zero activity. Further clarification. Do not approach human vessels. The report was logged at 0300 hours. By 0600, it had been forwarded to 17 fleet commanders across 4 star systems. By the end of the week, the Ghost Fleet had updated its engagement protocols for the first time in 230 years. The updated protocol contained one new line. It read, "Assume all human vessels are active until confirmed otherwise by direct species surrender." Note appended by High Command, confirmation method still under review. Current confirmation method considered unreliable. Previous confirmation method, sensor sweep. Sensor sweeps, it had been discovered, did not account for Compost.
Sarah never read the report. She was busy. The salvage work on the debris field had started. Novaterra needed resupply runs. And the Icarus needed a new biodigestion system because the old one had been repurposed in a way that voided several warranties and at least 2 safety regulations she didn't want to think about. She filed her own report. It was 4 lines. Ship status, holding. Crew status, holding. Planet status, holding. Threat status, gone. She submitted it, made something hot, and drank it before it got cold for the first time in 22 days. Some things, she thought, you don't need to explain. The Ghost Fleet would figure it out eventually. They were already trying.